When a woman has been entangled with a narcissist, the first thing she often loses isn't her time or even her peace. It's her name, her true identity. She begins to respond to labels that were never hers to carry. She starts defining herself by how someone else treated her instead of who she was created to be. This is where the journey must begin, rediscovering your name and what it truly means. The narcissist's greatest strategy is confusion. They don't come to love, they come to rewrite your understanding of love. And in doing so, they begin to rename you, not with truth, but with words dipped in manipulation. Instead of valuable, they call you needy. Instead of strong, they call you intimidating. Instead of kind, they label you as too sensitive. And slowly, these words start to echo louder than your own voice. You start walking around with an identity that was never yours. That's how control begins. Not by chains, but by conversation. But the good news is this: you are not who they said you were. You are not what the abuse tried to convince you of. You are who God originally designed, and no man, no narcissist, no manipulator, no past can change that blueprint. Your name is still whole. Your name is still worthy. Your name is still crowned with purpose. The real you is not broken. She's buried under survival. Rediscovering your identity is not a poetic idea. It is a spiritual necessity, because you will never walk in power if you are still wearing the wrong name tag. You can't access your full value while thinking you're discounted. And you'll never heal from someone you still believe had the right to define you. The narcissist only had power because you forgot who you were or never got the chance to learn it fully. When you know your identity, manipulation no longer feels like love, and abuse no longer feels like home. So how do you reclaim your name? You don't do it by confronting them. You do it by confronting yourself. Go back to the moments you first accepted. Go back to the first time you silenced your spirit to keep the peace. Go back to the first moment you laughed when it hurt. Because those moments matter. They reveal where you were rewritten. And only by going back can you correct the script. To reclaim your name, you must start by becoming intentional about your inner conversation. What you tell yourself about yourself must align with your creator, not your controller. You are not a burden because someone couldn't carry you. You are not too much because someone couldn't handle your depth. You are not hard to love because someone refused to love with integrity. The issue was never your essence. It was their inability to appreciate it. There's something deeply powerful about a woman who knows her name. Not the one they gave her, but the one she reclaimed in secret. She becomes unshakable. She no longer explains her worth. She embodies it. Her energy shifts. Her boundaries harden. Her silence becomes sacred. And the narcissist can no longer use the old tricks because she doesn't recognize the bait anymore. You can't be pulled back into a cage once you've realized you were meant to fly. The enemy of your soul always attacks identity first because it's the foundation of destiny. If you see yourself as weak, you will never stand. If you believe you're unworthy, you'll tolerate dysfunction. But when you awaken to your true name, daughter, queen, beloved, powerful, you begin to walk different, talk different, choose different, love different. And most of all, you stop settling. And here's what's ironic. The narcissist will never forget you once you remember who you are. Because now, you reflect everything they hoped you'd never realize. You're no longer a mirror of their ego. You've become a window into their lack. They couldn't break you. They only broke the version of you that didn't know her value. Now that you've been reborn, you've become a testimony they can't erase. So sister, this is not about revenge. This is about redemption. This is not about becoming someone they regret losing. This is about becoming the person you were always meant to be. One whose name was written in divine ink, not temporary trauma. Don't just move on. Move up. Let your identity be the foundation that the narcissist can never shake again. You are unforgettable, not because you begged for their memory, but because you became too powerful to deny. Emotional independence is more attractive and powerful than physical beauty. This truth is often overlooked in a world that celebrates outer appearance, but neglects inner stability. When a woman becomes emotionally independent, she steps into a realm that not only transforms how she views herself, but also how others experience her. Especially in the presence of a narcissist. Emotional independence creates a barrier that manipulation cannot breach. It becomes the armor that turns emotional warfare into a place of victory rather than victimhood. Emotional independence means that your sense of value, worth, and identity are not sourced from the behavior or approval of another person. It is the decision to anchor your self-esteem not in compliments or attention, but in unshakable truth. When you are emotionally independent, you're not seeking validation from someone who doesn't even understand how to love themselves properly. You no longer crave closure from the person who broke you. You stop needing their words to feel secure because your confidence is rooted in something that cannot be taken away. A narcissist thrives on control, especially emotional control. They want to be the one who can make or break your day with a word, a text, a look, or silence. But when you rise into emotional maturity, their tactics lose power. They text you after a silent treatment, and you don't flinch. They try to bait you with jealousy, and you don't respond. They insult you to provoke a breakdown, but you stay grounded. That's the kind of power that makes them fear what they cannot shake. You must understand that the most dangerous woman to a narcissist is not the loudest or the most physically beautiful. It's the woman who is whole. She has cried her tears. She has written her prayers. She has faced her trauma. And now she doesn't need a performance to feel loved. Her identity is intact. That woman cannot be guilt-tripped, gaslighted, or emotionally hijacked. Her soul is no longer on sale. Emotional independence does not mean you don't feel pain. It means you refuse to be owned by it. It doesn't mean you don't love. It means you love with boundaries. It doesn't mean you're hard. It means you've become wise. Emotional independence gives you the ability to say no without explaining, to walk away without drama, to set standards without apology. And when you do that, you break the narcissist's favorite tool, emotional dependency. The narcissist wants you to need them more than they need you. That's the imbalance they feed on. But when you become emotionally self-sufficient, the entire script is flipped. You are no longer living for their praise or begging for their attention. You start to see that their silence is not your punishment, it's their pattern. Their charm is not love, it's bait. Their rage is not about you, it's about their inability to control you anymore. What you'll notice is that once you step into emotional independence, you begin to walk with a new kind of clarity. Your mind is no longer foggy with confusion or anxiety. You can discern between affection and manipulation. You can tell the difference between love and control. You stop romanticizing red flags. You begin to understand that your peace is more precious than their presence. And here is the divine truth. When you become emotionally independent, you also become spiritually aligned. Because your emotions are no longer at the mercy of external validation. You're free to listen to the voice of God clearly. You can hear when you're being led away from chaos. You feel the conviction when you're about to entertain something that doesn't align with your destiny. Emotional independence is not just strength. It is spiritual discernment made practical. To the woman listening right now, you don't have to stay broken to be loved. You don't have to stay small to keep someone comfortable. You don't have to silence your needs to avoid conflict. That is not love. That is bondage. And you were not created to be emotionally enslaved to anyone's approval, attention, or apologies. You were born to be whole. And that wholeness is the very thing that will make you a woman a narcissist cannot get over. Because once you become emotionally independent, they lose access to the part of you they fed on the most. This is your calling. Not to beg to be chosen, but to choose yourself. Not to chase love, but to become love. Not to react to their cycles, but to rise from them. When you become emotionally independent, you become unforgettable. Not because you stayed, but because you left and never looked back. And that, my sister, is power. Purposeful women create boundaries, not excuses. This is one of the deepest truths you'll ever walk in when you've survived a narcissist. Because here's what they don't expect. A woman who knows exactly where she ends and where someone else begins. They expect you to bend, to tolerate, to reason away disrespect with they're just going through something. Or maybe I'm too sensitive. But once you step into your purpose, those excuses lose their power. You no longer defend someone's dysfunction. You protect your peace. Boundaries are not walls built out of bitterness. They are fences designed for order, for identity, for legacy. A purposeful woman understands that without boundaries, she invites chaos to rule her life. She knows that when she says no to manipulation, she's not being difficult. She's being deliberate. She's not avoiding connection. She's protecting her calling. Purpose doesn't survive where abuse is tolerated. Destiny dies slowly in environments where excuses are more common than standards. The narcissist feeds on excuses. They use your empathy against you. They'll cry, plead, and promise. They'll tell you it was stress or trauma or your misunderstanding. And if you don't have the anchor of boundaries, you'll fall for it every time. You'll keep reasoning their patterns instead of recognizing them. You'll keep giving them time they didn't earn, forgiveness they didn't value, and access they only used to break you again. That cycle ends the moment you embrace this truth. Love is not supposed to hurt you to prove itself. Love respects the line you draw, not tries to erase it. A purposeful woman draws a line, not because she's cold, but because she's clear. She doesn't tolerate the same pain twice. She understands the difference between being called and being used. And once she recognizes the pattern, she no longer argues with it. She adjusts her access. Her boundaries are not punishment. They are preservation. They are the evidence that she knows her value. And when a narcissist sees that their games no longer work, when their charm falls flat, when their gaslighting gets ignored, they panic. They realize she's no longer emotionally available for confusion. She's now operating on vision. That's the real power. Vision doesn't apologize for cutting ties. Vision doesn't explain to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Vision moves. Vision leaves dinner tables full of fake peace and goes where peace is real. Vision doesn't need approval. It requires obedience. So when you build boundaries from your vision, you stop entertaining people who bring distraction. You stop negotiating your time with people who treat your presence like a convenience store, open whenever they're empty, closed when they're full. And here's the truth they don't want you to know. When you get serious about your boundaries, the narcissist becomes obsessed, not because they love you, but because they lost the control. They can't access you anymore. They can't provoke the reaction they used to. They can't confuse you into believing their lies. You no longer play the role they cast you in. You rewrote the script. You stopped performing. And that's when the story changed. That's when they started to feel the weight of losing someone who finally understood herself. There's a reason boundaries make you unforgettable. Because narcissists are used to women who shrink, who doubt themselves, who second-guess their intuition. But a woman with purpose knows better. She trusts her discernment. She believes in her healing. And she doesn't explain her decisions to people who created the reason for those decisions in the first place. You don't owe anyone access just because they were once close. You don't owe your loyalty to someone who made pain your lifestyle. You owe yourself alignment. You owe your future peace. Boundaries are how you say, I love myself enough to not go back. They're how you protect your energy, guard your purpose, and maintain your growth. And the narcissist can't handle that because their whole game was built on your weakness. But now you're whole, now you're focused, now you're walking in the kind of clarity that makes your past look like a setup for your next chapter. Excuses will always keep you in cycles. Boundaries will launch you into seasons. Choose the path that leads you forward. Choose the boundaries that honor your soul. That's how you become the woman they never get over. Because you're no longer the woman who makes excuses for mistreatment. You're the woman who became untouchable the moment she got serious about her purpose. When your self-worth is anchored in God, it becomes untouchable, unshakable, and unchangeable. This kind of worth is not found in flattery, not in attention, not in romantic validation, and certainly not in the approval of someone who is broken and manipulative. A narcissist thrives when your sense of value depends on their validation. They will inflate you one moment and deflate you the next. But when your value is rooted in something eternal, they lose their grip. A narcissist's favorite weapon is confusion. They aim to disorient you, to make you question your beauty, your intelligence, your contribution, your very existence. But here's what they cannot do. They cannot diminish what they did not give. If your identity is built on their compliments, it will crumble under their criticism. But when your identity is built on divine truth, that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, that you are chosen, royal, set apart, then no insult, no silence, no gaslighting can rewrite your worth. This is the kind of woman who becomes unforgettable, not because she plays games, but because she no longer needs to play. Not because she tries to impress, but because she knows who she is. When your worth is rooted in God, you no longer chase clarity from someone who thrives on confusion. You no longer seek closure from someone who leaves doors open so they can return. You no longer stay hoping they'll see your value because you've already seen it. And that's enough. A woman with God-anchored self-worth doesn't settle. She doesn't explain her standards. She doesn't perform for attention. She doesn't beg for consistency. She walks away not to hurt them, but to protect what she carries. And that kind of walk, quiet, graceful, grounded, shakes a narcissist to their core, because they expected you to need them to feel whole. But you were whole the moment you realized you never needed them to begin with. Let's talk about that moment. The moment you decided to believe what God said about you more than what that narcissist did to you. That's when everything changed. That's when the fog started to lift. That's when the manipulation started to lose its power. Because when you anchor yourself in eternal truth, temporal lies lose their grip. They can't guilt you when your spirit is free. They can't shame you when your past is redeemed. They can't bait you with love bombs when you've learned to love yourself with divine love. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. You've aligned with heaven's view of you, and that alignment makes you dangerous to those who wanted you insecure. That alignment is your armor. When you know who you are, you stop negotiating with confusion. You stop second-guessing your discernment. You stop editing your truth just to make others comfortable. And here's the real transformation. When your self-worth is anchored in God, you don't need revenge. You don't need them to suffer to feel better. Your glow is the evidence. Your peace is the victory. Your progress is the testimony. A narcissist can't compete with that because they can't fake healing. They can't imitate wholeness. They can mimic charm, but not contentment. They can fake being nice, but not being free. Your freedom becomes their torment, not because you want it that way, but because they didn't expect it. They thought you'd fall apart. They thought you'd come crawling back. But instead you rose slowly, quietly, powerfully, until you became a woman they couldn't reach anymore. And now, even when they think of you, they are confronted with what they lost, not just who they lost. Because you didn't just leave, you became. And becoming is something no narcissist can erase. This kind of transformation doesn't come from self-help books alone. It comes from divine help. It comes from the moments you cried on your bedroom floor and still got up. From the times you wanted to text back but deleted the message. From the days you doubted your worth and still chose to speak life over yourself. That's the journey of anchoring your worth in something deeper than wounds. It's the slow, steady decision to believe that you were never created to be an option, a trophy, or a placeholder. When you anchor your value in God, you stop asking others to see you because you finally see yourself. And that vision of yourself, healed and whole, radiant and unshaken, is the vision the narcissist cannot forget. Not because they loved you, but because they lost the version of you that no longer needed their love to survive. When a woman walks in her purpose and not in the shadow of someone's approval, something inside her shifts permanently. She no longer bends to be accepted, nor does she perform for applause. She wakes up each day with clarity, not confusion, direction, not desperation. This is the kind of woman a narcissist can't get over, because she no longer lives to feed their fragile ego, but to fulfill a calling that existed long before they ever entered her life. You see, narcissists thrive on dependency. They are addicted to being the center of your attention, the object of your affection, and the source of your direction. But when you shift the source of your validation from their opinion to your assignment, you remove their power. Purpose is dangerous to narcissism, because purpose gives a woman vision, and vision opens her eyes to deception. She starts asking deeper questions. She begins to see patterns instead of promises. She discerns manipulation in words that once sounded like romance. And suddenly she's no longer intoxicated by charm, because she's sober with calling. That's why narcissists hate when a woman finds her purpose. It exposes them. Because now they're not competing with another man, they're competing with her destiny. And destiny always wins. When a woman is rooted in her calling, she becomes hard to manipulate, because she's not afraid to be alone. She's not driven by loneliness. She's led by assignment. She doesn't need flattery because she's fueled by impact. She doesn't need control because she trusts divine order. That inner alignment makes her radiant, not reactive. And the narcissist who once had a leash on her emotions suddenly finds themselves holding nothing but old tactics that no longer work. They call, She doesn't answer. They lie. She doesn't argue. They provoke. She doesn't respond. Because when a woman is focused, she can't be distracted. Purpose demands focus. It requires discipline. It creates internal structure. And a structured woman cannot be manipulated by chaos. She's too rooted to be tossed around by feelings. Too grounded to be baited into drama. Too busy building to be bothered by games. The narcissist used to be her main concern. Now they're just a footnote in her testimony. This doesn't mean she hates them. It means she no longer needs them. And that's what terrifies them the most. The narcissist remembers the woman who changed her life after them. The woman who stopped answering messages. The woman who used her pain to fuel her purpose. The woman who stopped crying over what she lost and started rejoicing over what she found herself. The woman who no longer sought closure because she realized purpose was the closure. She understood that sometimes God lets them hurt you so that He can heal you through calling, so that He can reintroduce you to yourself, because your purpose was never to be a placeholder in someone else's toxic cycle. Your purpose was to be a blueprint for someone else's breakthrough. And now everything about her is different. The way she walks, the way she talks, the way she carries herself. She doesn't chase love. She attracts growth. She doesn't seek approval. She walks in authority. She's not arrogant, but she's aware. She's not bitter, but she's bold. She's not afraid to start over because she knows that when God is in it, nothing is wasted, not even the heartbreak. This is why narcissists can't get over her, because she left quietly but healed loudly. She never tried to prove her worth. She became it. And now, even in her absence, her presence lingers, not because of what she gave them, but because of who she became without them. And while they may try to replace her, they'll never replicate her, because her value wasn't in her body, her beauty, or her servitude. It was in her obedience to divine purpose. And that is something a narcissist can't erase, forget, or destroy. When you forgive a narcissist, but you do not reconnect, you make one of the most powerful decisions a healed person can ever make. It's a level of maturity that many people don't reach, not because they're not capable, but because their pain still governs their choices. You see, forgiveness is often misunderstood. People think it means reconciliation or acting as if nothing ever happened. But real forgiveness is an internal act. It's something you do not for them, but for you. It is the release of bitterness without the return to bondage. When a narcissist hurts you, they do so with the belief that they can keep the door to your heart unlocked. They expect that after a little time has passed, they can return with the same charm, the same apologies, the same false promises. What truly shocks them, what they never prepare for, is a woman who forgives but doesn't forget her worth. A woman who no longer needs their presence to feel validated. When you forgive and move on without granting them access again, you disrupt the power dynamic they relied on to manipulate you. Forgiveness, in its highest form, is wisdom wrapped in grace. It's saying, I release you from my judgment, but I also release myself from your influence. You understand that holding on to anger ties you to a toxic cycle, but opening the door again to someone who showed you their pattern isn't wisdom, it's self-sabotage. You can forgive someone and still choose never to allow them to sit at your table again. You can bless someone and still block them. That's not bitterness, that's discernment. A narcissist interprets your forgiveness as weakness because they believe it means they still have emotional leverage. But true forgiveness takes more strength than any argument. It is not passive. It's an intentional shift of power. It's when you take the poison out of your system, but you also remove the cup from their hands. You are not obligated to re-expose yourself to someone simply because you no longer hate them. Emotional maturity is knowing the difference between peace and passivity. Peace often requires distance. Distance is sometimes the only way to protect what God has restored in you. The truth is, when you forgive without reconnecting, you teach them a lesson that no lecture could ever deliver. You teach them that access to you was a privilege, not a guarantee. You show them that your love was not weakness, it was a gift. And now that the gift has been withdrawn, they are left to face themselves. That space you create by not going back becomes their mirror. And narcissists hate mirrors because they can't control what they see in them. Without you to reflect their fantasy, they are left with their own emptiness. You didn't just leave physically, you left spiritually, mentally, emotionally. And that level of departure is what truly breaks the cycle. You didn't walk away to make them chase you. You walked away to save yourself. You didn't heal to prove anything to them. You healed because your life was worth more than survival mode. That kind of growth will always leave a mark. They may not say it. They may never admit it. But in quiet moments when their mask falls off, they remember the one who forgave them and didn't come back. You become a woman they can't get over. Not because of how much you love them, but because of how gracefully you outgrew them. Forgiveness without reconnection is a sign that your heart is soft, but your mind is clear. It means you're no longer living in the past, but you've also taken the lesson with you into your future. You don't wish them harm, but you also won't make room for harm to revisit you. That level of clarity is rare. It's powerful, it's holy, and it sends a message to every narcissist, every manipulator, every deceiver. You no longer have access to the healed version of me. There's no greater message of transformation than walking away with no bitterness, no vengeance, and no invitation to return. That's how you become unforgettable. That's how you become unshakable. And that's how you break the pattern, not just for yourself, but for every woman who is watching you live free. Your healing is a blueprint. Your boundary is a testimony. Your forgiveness is your weapon. And your no is your shield. Let them feel the absence of the old you. Let them see what it looks like when a woman finally understands that peace is more valuable than presence. And let your decision not to reconnect be the loudest declaration that you now walk in wisdom, wholeness, and self-respect. That is a legacy they will never be able to replace or forget. When you use your pain to build instead of bleed, you take back the power the narcissist tried to steal. You are no longer living life from a place of brokenness, desperation, or emotional wounds. Instead, you are functioning from a healed, restored, and divinely aligned state. Pain is a powerful force, but it was never meant to define you. It was meant to develop you. And when you begin to understand that, everything changes. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And you begin to declare, this happened for something greater through me. The narcissist did not expect you to transform. They expected you to stay stuck, to spiral, to self-destruct. They expected the rejection to ruin you. The betrayal was supposed to become your personality. The gaslighting was supposed to make you doubt your intuition forever. But you did something radical. You turned your pain into purpose. You took what was meant to paralyze you and turned it into the foundation for your growth. You stopped bleeding and started building. That's what makes you unforgettable. See, when a woman rises from the ashes of narcissistic abuse and does not carry the bitterness, but carries the lesson, she becomes a testimony that heaven still heals, that God still restores, and that broken things can become beautiful in the hands of purpose. She becomes the woman who doesn't just survive. She leads, she teaches, she builds others, and in doing so, she exposes everything the narcissist tried to bury. The narcissist depends on silence. They depend on shame. They depend on you staying small, apologizing for the pain they caused. But when you become a woman who speaks from her scars, not from her wounds, you become powerful. You become someone whose voice shatters generational cycles. You become someone whose story lights the path for other women still trying to find their way out. You start mentoring through your healing. You start creating through your pain. You write books, raise children with wisdom, start businesses, build ministries, or simply live with joy. And every step you take is a reminder that you were never supposed to stay where they left you. Let me tell you something powerful. A narcissist can't stop a woman who chooses to build. You can't shame a woman who turned her wounds into wisdom. You can't confuse a woman who asked the hard questions and found her answers in truth. You can't control a woman who used manipulation as her motivation to rise. You can't forget a woman who turned what was meant to kill her into something that now gives others life. You see, emotional pain is energy. And where you direct that energy determines what kind of life you live. If you keep replaying the betrayal, nurturing the anger, and feeding the bitterness, your life will begin to reflect the very darkness you escaped. But when you take that same pain and use it to create change in your heart, your home, your habits, you become a force of transformation, not just for you, but for your lineage. Your daughters will not have to heal from what you endured. Your sons will not repeat the same patterns. You did the hard work. You turned pain into bricks, and now you're building an unshakable legacy. And here's the truth. The narcissist will never admit. They saw your potential before you did. That's why they tried to crush it. That's why they made you doubt yourself. That's why they had to break you, because they could see something inside of you they could never imitate. They felt it, that power, that light, that resilience. But the moment you saw it for yourself, the moment you believed in your own value, you became untouchable. You no longer needed their validation. You no longer craved their attention. You no longer begged for clarity or closure. You built your own peace, and now you're the one they think about. Not because they love you, not because they changed, but because you grew, because you didn't fold, because you became something they will never be, whole without pretending, strong without oppressing, loving without needing to manipulate. You became living proof that healing is real and destiny is greater than dysfunction. So keep building. Let your healing be loud. Let your joy be evidence. Let your journey be the rebuke to every lie they spoke over you. And let your pain fuel the movement you're creating, not the memory you're trying to erase. You don't owe them silence. You don't owe them shame. You don't owe them access. What you owe yourself is peace, purpose, and the freedom to rise again. You are not a woman who bleeds quietly. You are a woman who builds loudly. And that's why they can't get over you. When you decide to become unavailable to manipulation, you're not just setting boundaries with people. You're making a spiritual declaration. You are announcing to heaven, to hell, and to your past that your mind, your emotions, and your peace are no longer for sale. Narcissists operate through emotional warfare. They thrive where there is confusion, where you second guess yourself, where guilt and fear cloud your judgment. The moment you become unavailable to manipulation, you take away their ability to invade your mental space and script your reality. Emotional manipulation is subtle at first. It comes disguised as concern, as love, as neediness. A narcissist doesn't walk in the room with a sign that says, "I'm here to destroy your self-worth." No, they wear charm like perfume. They study you, mirror you, echo your dreams and language until you feel seen. But their goal is not to love you, it's to own you. And when you start waking up to that fact, the first thing they'll test is your availability. Can they still reach you with guilt? Can they still twist your empathy into access? Can they still play victim and have you apologize for standing up for yourself? That's why you must begin the work on the inside. Being unavailable doesn't start with blocking their number. It starts with unblocking your soul. It's about deprogramming the internal messages that say, maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe it is my fault. Or maybe I should have been more patient. You see, the most powerful manipulation is the one you perform on yourself after they planted the seed. When you dismantle those internal lies, you are no longer an easy target. You no longer apologize for breathing. You stop editing your voice. You begin to believe that your instincts are not a problem. They are protection. When you become unavailable to manipulation, your no becomes final. Not because you're mean, but because you are clear. And clarity is powerful. Narcissists can't thrive where clarity lives, because clarity sets limits. It doesn't leave doors half open. It doesn't invite negotiation where there should be separation. You begin to see through the gaslighting. You start identifying love bombing for what it really is, bait, not blessing. And you realize that when someone says you've changed, it's often because you stopped being convenient for their dysfunction. You don't explain yourself over and over. You don't try to convince people of your worth. You don't go back to arguments that end in circles. Your new peace becomes uncomfortable for manipulators. Why? Because they were addicted to your reaction. They needed your emotional energy like fuel. They weren't feeding off your love. They were feeding off your need to be understood, validated, and chosen. But when you heal, you no longer need their validation. You validate yourself. And when you do that, the manipulation has nowhere to land. This change won't always be dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. It's choosing not to reply. It's walking away mid-conversation when you feel the old patterns start again. It's deleting the paragraph you wrote trying to explain your side. It's recognizing that some people don't misunderstand you. They need to, so they don't have to change. You becoming unavailable to manipulation means you stop volunteering for your own oppression. You will be tested. Narcissists do not let go easily of someone they used to control. When they feel your absence, they'll often return with a new mask, a new crisis, or a sudden apology. Don't mistake this for growth. Manipulation evolves when it's exposed. But your job is not to stay and play detective. Your job is to keep walking in truth. Manipulators will try to convince you that your boundaries are cruel, that your silence is punishment. But you must remember, self-respect is not cruelty. Peace is not petty. Protecting your mind and your energy is not selfish. It's wise. The woman who becomes unavailable to manipulation becomes a threat to cycles. She breaks generational patterns. She ends soul ties. She chooses healing over history. She becomes a mirror that narcissists can't handle because she reflects what they lost, not because she stayed bitter, but because she moved on whole. Her presence is no longer a place of comfort for toxicity. Her heart is no longer a rehab center for the emotionally abusive. And what happens next? You don't just recover, you rise. You begin attracting people who are drawn to your strength, not your wounds. You stop being entertainment for someone else's dysfunction and start becoming inspiration for someone else's freedom. You step into rooms no longer needing to be seen, but ready to serve. And perhaps most powerful of all, your absence becomes your answer. They know they can't come back, not because you blocked them, but because you became someone they no longer recognize. Someone who no longer needs fixing. Because she finally knows she was never broken. She was simply too available to people who weren't assigned to her destiny. So stay unavailable to manipulation. You are not cold, you are healed. And healing is the kind of closure a narcissist can never take credit for. It's the kind of transformation that speaks without words and leaves an echo they can never forget.